And as I was there, I had just finished eating. So at least I got a meal today. Probably like my last meal.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Carden. Well, hey, Donna.
Hey, David.
I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I'm happy to be back. I appreciate Jen and Karen stepping in for me when, we lost my mom, and it was a rough week and rough couple of weeks. And it was great to have business partners, and even you were eager to help. Boyan and everybody. So I'm very appreciative of all of that response and excited to be back.
Yep. So we are glad to have you back. I was waiting on people to send me hate mail. Like, what did you do to Donna? We haven't heard from her, but she's back just in time for an interview that we're going to be doing today that I'm very interested in. And
me too.
The interview is with Robert Cioffi, and Robert is with Progressive Computing Incorporated. And for those of you who have been longtime listeners, you might remember when Kaseya had the hack a couple of years ago, and Don and I were talking about how terrible that is and would be to go through. Robert is one of the few people, if maybe not the only person, that has endured that and decided to come out and talk about what it looks like to have gone through that. And I would say probably still going through portions of that. Ripple effects, I'm sure, are very long on an incident like that. But he's with us today. So Robert, tell us a little bit more about yourself, and let's get into what happened on that fateful day in July 2nd of 2021.
Sure, David and Donna, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you today, and to all your listeners for tuning in and listening to the story. My business, as you mentioned, Progressive Computing, is your traditional MSP, or for those not in the industry, we're essentially an outsourced IT services company for small and mid-sized companies. So small and mid-sized firms would look to us to be their IT department. And we're based in Yonkers, New York, which is just north of New York City. We're lost in their massive shadow. But the county of Westchester, where I live and where Yonkers is, has 1 million residents. So it's not a small area by any stretch. It's actually pretty densely populated all around here. And we've been in business for 30 years. So on July 2nd of 2021, a ransomware gang, international cyber gang called Revel Sodno Kibi. Even that requires some explaining about exactly what that structure looks like. They found a flaw in a piece of software that we use to manage all of our customers. And when we say manage all of our customers, what I mean by that is that there's a piece of software that we install on everyone's desktop and on their server. So every laptop, desktop, and every server that they manage, we install a piece of software on there. So it helps us as their IT department manage these resources, things like patching and remote control, doing inventory of things, all sorts of things that you might imagine, even if you're not a technical person. So they broke into this piece of software and they used it to push ransomware to every single one of these endpoints. And all of that took place between 10:49 a.m. and approximately by 12:30 p.m. So less than 2 hours later, every single endpoint, including the ones that are in my company, including the very computer that I am speaking to you from right now, had ransomware installed on it. Were completely encrypted, scrambled. All the files on every system were completely useless. This was 80 customers with about 200 locations across 4 time zones, about 2,500 endpoints, meaning desktops and laptops, and about 250 of those endpoints were servers. So to say that we had a gigantic mess on our hands would be a gross understatement.
Yeah. Now, this is something we talk about often, Robert, is that any weekend that's coming up into a holiday weekend,
Oh, yes.
is like, you better watch out. It's
Yes.
coming. And
Yep.
just so happened, the 2nd of July, we're July 4th weekend, right? That's a Friday. That
Yes,
was a
it was.
Friday.
Mhm.
So they're anticipating that people are probably not going to be in on Monday. Gives them a lot more time.
Correct.
And so you're sitting there Friday morning, maybe mentally already checked out for the holiday, right?
I think my entire team rightfully was thinking the same thing that you had just said. Yes, it was really odd too, because that day I was in such light spirits, thinking that I was going to go home and enjoy this magnificent 3-day holiday weekend. I have to say this one little part. The weather here was absolutely fantastic in New York. And if you're from the Northeast or any part of the Midwest or any part of the country where winters are harsh, you live for these moments where the dried up potted plants that haven't had any water or sunshine in a long time, suddenly, this beautiful weather descends upon your neck of the woods. And the forecast, not just for those 3 days, but like for the next 10 days was incredible. So we live for these moments. And I had a lot of weekend plans that went right down the toilet.
Oh,
yeah. So,
by the way, that was the least of our expenses. So, if I could trade it all just to say, hey, I gotta even go to jail in a dark room for 3 days or solitary confinement, I would have gladly accepted those terms over the pain and suffering that we endured over the months and weeks, and now even years later.
Now, I used to go to Rochester, Minnesota, and my brother now lives in the Syracuse area. And my joke to them has always been, as a good Southerner, I always wonder what you do on that day that you call summer.
Yeah, that one day. Yeah. Now we get a little bit more than a day, but we certainly relish those days. And Dave, to your point, threat actors or hackers, however you want to call them, the bad guys,
right,
will often target holiday weekends, knowing that people's guards are down, they're mentally checked out, they may be light staffed already, and they have they can fly under the cover of that time and less watchful eyes. And it's also a way that they can inflict the maximum psychological and mental and emotional damage. It's not just, them scoring money, but I think they actually do it sort of purposefully to add that sort of middle finger to the whole story as well. Not only did we, own you and we're demanding large sums of money, but, we kind of insulted you at the same time. I do have to say one point about this attack. Now, most of my story is about the emotional, human, psychological part of the tale, which is, I think, the undersold or undertold part of these types of events. Everybody is expecting me to talk about the bits and bytes and the analytical anatomy and forensics and all that. Yes, I can talk about some of that stuff. But here's one little tidbit for you in terms of timing. The attacker, it is believed that he messed up. And he messed up because he had an automated system to carry out this attack. And he had programmed it to launch at night, except now remember that this attack started, for us at least, our server was attacked at 10:49 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, except that he left the clock or the time zone on the attacking computer to his time zone in the Ukraine. So it was nighttime in the Ukraine, but it was still daytime here. Had he adjusted the time zone correctly, it would have launched while all of us were half in the bag on a Friday night. So in some weird way, maybe, I don't know, that we may have been luckier, or I don't know, there's lots of conjecture that says that maybe more computers would have been off at that time of day.
Yeah, but don't we as MSPs tell people, leave your computers on all the time?
Yeah, because we need to patch them and service them and, do a lot of automated stuff. And what better time to do that on a holiday weekend when you're not around? So I'm not sure. There's a lot of part of this story where people will ask me, like, the could have, should have, would have sort of thing, or, if you had a crystal ball or if you could turn back time. It's so hard to play that game. All I can tell you is the experience that we went through. So I don't know if it would have been any better or worse. But timing, to your point, David, is one of these things that these attacks are typically launched, like you said, around the holiday weekends, right? We're recording this mid or end of August. We're coming up on Labor Day here in the United States. So, that's one of those things where you have to, be mindful.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with your attack, I had a client that thankfully some IT folks were able to fight the good fight in the middle of the night and stop them from doing data exfiltration.
Okay.
Yeah. It was one of those moments where I was like, I know you guys were stressed out. I wish you'd filmed it so we could have, made a real movie about it.
Yeah.
At that point, they really wanted to shoot me, but I do know that during that time frame, that particular group was very, very active.
They were.
And so, do you know how many other MSPs were hit at the same time you were?
Yeah, so I can give you some data.
General,
This is based upon stuff that's publicly available. Some of it was privately shared to me. I personally know one other MSP who was affected by the same attack because we've spoken together at conferences on panels, and we've had some joint things that we've done together. But there were approximately 50 to 60 Kaseya customers that were affected, right? And not all of them are MSPs. Mm-hmm. Some of them were IT departments that use the same software within their organizations, most of which were MSPs, though. So, the couple of the famous ones were, and I forget the Viscom or Visicom or something like that, a European-based MSP that one of their largest customers, Co-op, which is a large supermarket chain based out of Sweden, has 800 stores throughout Europe, 500 of which was affected, had ransomware installed on all their cash registers running Windows.
Oh, gosh.
Wow.
So imagine that. Imagine all these cash registers get ransomware in 500 stores, and you've got to close for like a week in order to do the repairs. Think about the revenue loss, income and wages lost to part-time people who work hourly, all the perishable goods that were lost. I mean, that alone is huge. So the estimates are, about 50 to 60 companies, of which probably the estimate is about 1,500 different organizations were affected, right? So I told you about my 80 plus me is one. So I'm 81 out of that 1,500. And the estimate was somewhere north of 1 million computers that were affected by this. Again,
wow.
These are rough numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we'll ever really know.
No, it's too hard to know them all, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
but wow.
Talk about the moment. Like we always talk about, when you're ransom, right? It's usually not a secret. You it. Things are happening on your computer, or you've got some kind of something happening. But for you, it's a little different because if my business gets ransomed, I see it on computer. But in your case, you have clients that are being ransomed in mass.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure as a business, one of the business owners, you're probably not answering technical help desk calls. So what happened? Who brings you the, don't kill the messenger message?
Well, the messenger, as I will describe, already had the look of death on his face. Like I said, it was a bit of an unusual day, right? Very light. Like today, it's about almost 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as we're speaking now. And I only ate something about an hour and a half ago, and that was the first thing I ate all day. And I was lucky to eat, right? Because my days as an MSP are typically, fast paced, and sometimes I just skip. But that particular day, it was about noon, and I decided to do that rare event, eat. So I got up, I went to my kitchen, and I sat at our long kitchen table, sort of facing a doorway. So think of it's like a long galley kitchen, and I was looking out the door, which gave me a clear vantage point of a very long hallway that traversed our second floor. And at the other end of that hallway was a staircase. And as I was there, I had just finished eating. So at least I got a meal. Probably like my last meal.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, exactly. So up from the downstairs, from our first floor, walks my director of operations, Jay. And I immediately knew something was wrong as he turned that corner and started walking down the hallway to me. He had a kind of peculiar gait about his walk. It seemed nervous. It seemed, dare I say, even a little disjointed. I don't really know how to describe it other than saying those words.
Couldn't stand up well.
Well, but he was also starting to quicken his pace, and he could see me. And when he saw me, and I acknowledged that he saw, I saw him and he saw me, it was just something on his face that became really twisted. And so I'm looking at him, and there was somebody else in the kitchen who didn't have the vantage point that I had. And I looked up into him and I said, "Holy crap, I think somebody just died." And I really meant those words. Jay looked like he was coming to deliver bad news, right? Almost like when, you see, and there's a lot of cliches that happen that day. Mm-hmm. But when you watch a movie and the doorbell rings and you open it and there's two police officers standing there, without exchanging any words, you already know, something awful happened. And so I stood up and I went to the threshold of the kitchen and met Jay within a few steps after that. And he was just, he was pale, he was sweating, he was not himself. Jay and I have a great professional relationship, and he couldn't look me in the eye. Yeah. So, I was bracing myself saying, crap, did like my business partner just drop dead? Did like one of our techs just get into a bad car wreck? Did somebody from my family just call the office looking for me and he picked up the phone, right? Or he was handed the phone. I was thinking of all sorts of things like that. And honestly, as bad as this story is, I mean, thankfully it was none of the above, but that's where my head was, so, I kind of tried to shake him out of his stupor, and he wouldn't even look at me. And he goes, "All of our customers are ransomware." Now, that's not something that you can process easily. Nah. It's almost like being told somebody just died, right?
Everybody just died.
Well, yeah, it was kind of that, right? Or just some fate that just doesn't, like, it's incomprehensible. Like, that stuff only happens in movies. That stuff doesn't happen to me or you, right? It only happens to strangers. It's only things that you hear about in the news. But here he was saying it to me. And so I rejected his reality and tried to insert my own, maybe in some sort of self-defense mechanism. But I kind of grabbed him by the shoulders and I shook him a little bit. And I said, "Jay, like, that's impossible. Like, which customer was ransomware?" And that's when he locked eyes with me and said, "All of them, Robert." And again, I insisted back, "No, I reject this." Like, I didn't say those words, but like that
denial.
But here I was, right? I was in a little bit of denial here. So in some ways, I actually was living that bad news of somebody dying because, the first reaction is denial. And I think out of either some sort of way to get through to me, I don't think he really remembers this, and I don't think he'll ever admit that this was what it was. But I think subconsciously, what he did was he started to list our customers, starting with the largest ones, naming like our top 10 or 15 customers one by one by one. And one by one by one, it was like a mountain of rock kind of collapsing in on me as each one of these names just hit me with such great force. Now, there was something else peculiar that started to happen in this instance. As I was listening to what he was saying, I could hear and even see within the office, out of my peripheral vision and that background hearing, conversations that went like this: "I don't know what's going on. Calm down. Like, let me find a technician. Let me see what's happening. Let me get back to you." There was a lot of nervous chatter I could hear with people on the phone. And it wasn't just one person. It was like everybody that I could either hear or see was in some sort of alarmed state. Nobody was smiling. And there was a lot of confusion going around in the office. So suddenly that beautiful, 80 plus degree, no humidity, absolutely 10 best days of the year here in New York, while that reality still existed outside of our walls, within side of our building, the dark clouds had started to envelop us, and it was just the beginning of the maelstrom that we would have to deal with. And things kind of just got worse from there. So I'll pause. I'm sure you probably have some questions.
Well, I'm sure what you did is you pulled out your instant response book and you flipped to page 13, and all things were done and well by the end of the day, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have an app on my smartphone that I just tapped a button and it magically all disappeared and went away.
Yeah, I
No, David, no, that did not happen.
Because, and I say that jokingly because it's when people have similar incidents or even this type of incident, it amazes me how they will respond with, "Well, you're going to have us back up and running in a couple of hours, right?"
Well, that was a conversation that took place repeatedly that afternoon. Yeah, people wanted to know at what time that evening systems would be back online.
Right. And Donna and I talk about this very often, that when something happens, you better be prepared for not hours, not days, but weeks of downtime.
Correct. Right. Mm-hmm. And when I get to that, we'll explain a little bit about, some of the recovery time, which from what I'm told was actually a pretty big Herculean effort on our part about what happened and who helped and how we overcame that mathematical problem, right? Because an MSP, as many of you probably know, I know David, I know Donna, as well, is that, we're designed, to provide these outsourced services, but not simultaneously to everyone all at once, because the typical small business only needs fractional support, right?
Yeah.
And statistically, we could handle at our size 80 or 100 accounts easily on a normal average every day.
Yeah.
But to respond to a disaster at 100% of them all at the same time is a mathematical problem that you're just not designed to be able to respond to.
Yeah, we're like a timeshare. You can't have every timeshare owner show up at the same time.
Correct. That's a great way of saying it. Yeah, it's a beautiful way to say that. I'm going to steal that. Thanks, David.
Yeah, you're welcome. Just send me a penny for every time you use it.
Well, I was going to send you an invoice for my time today, but I think we're even.
Oh, I guess we're even. We're good to go.
We're squared up, buddy. Yeah, no, I'm kidding.
I know. I love it. Yeah.
So I do want to ask you about, you talked about all of these people. You're hearing it all happen. As the leader, you've got to get your wits about you.
Oh yeah,
because if you're freaking out, they're going to freak way out.
Yep.
How did you? Because you're in denial. You hear all this going on. You're clearly a really smart guy, and you're trying to make that switch. That I've got to lead, but what's the first thing?
Well, thank you for calling me some nice things there. I don't know if any of them are true, but I'll try to live up to them. I did not know exactly what to do in that specific moment in time, right? It's almost like being in a car wreck and you are maybe physically turned upside down and mentally you're in 100 different directions. So my instincts sort of kicked in and I just grabbed Jay and I knew that I needed more evidence. I needed more information other than just simply being told. I needed to process this a little better before anything else. So I grabbed him.
I need data.
Yeah, I needed data, right? I mean, it's just a harsh reality. I needed to assess my situation a little bit better, other than the information that I was being told, as well as what my eyes and ears were telling me, right? So, and I knew instinctually, as this passionate Italian American, that my emotions were probably taking charge too much, and I needed to be able to tamp them down for the moment. So I grabbed Jay, we went to my office, and I just started logging into systems and started looking for evidence. Now, there's a lot of details about this story, about what happened, and I'm just going to kind of go through them quickly. Otherwise, we'll be here until midnight. But, we had, senior technicians in our ears. I'm logged into systems and we're looking for evidence. One of my engineers is starting to tell me about things that he sees within the Kaseya server that we use that was attacked, right? And that was now programmed, right? He could see actually evidence of the system pushing out this nefarious, bad, evil software to every one of these endpoints. and that it had accomplished almost 100% of its target mission, right? It was nearing the end of what it needed to do. In fact, it was actually at the end. And something peculiar happened to me and my computer. And it was sort of that last nail in the coffin, if you want to use that as an analogy, or it was the one thing that brought it all to reality for me. And so for the non-technical listeners, you look at your desktop and you have icons like a Word document or an Excel document. And you're used to seeing those familiar icons, right? They're little pictures, they're a little graphical representation of what that file is or what it does. Imagine that they're all white boxes. Windows, if it doesn't know how to interpret that file, it's like it knows that an Excel document is an Excel document, so it puts that familiar X or that familiar blue W if it's a Word document, or that PDF, right? That sort of red-looking thing. If it doesn't know a file type, it's going to put a white box there. And I watched literally the 25 or 30 icons on my desktop start to flip one by one, almost like a card dealer turning cards over. All of those icons go from their normal icon to a white box. And that, if it's not evident to you, is the telltale sign that now every single file on your computer is encrypted and scrambled. Windows doesn't know how to interpret those, so it turns them white through my heart. And I knew that now we're dead. Like everything is encrypted. Now even my own damn computer, except one file that was not encrypted. And it was named README. And it was a Word, it was a notepad document, right? Those little text documents. And if I opened it up, which I did, because I knew that it was only text and there was nothing harmful in it, was the ransom note, which I still have today, by the way.
So that had to feel like just like massive violation.
Yeah, it was even further than a massive violation, David, because you know what? You can violate me in all sorts of ways. You could break into my car. I've had my car stolen. I know what that feels like. You can, beat me up. You can mug me. There's a lot of things, but like you haven't owned my existence by doing any of those things. I can replace the car. My body will heal. My ego, well, maybe my ego won't heal, but my ego may be bruised, but I'll deal with it, right? I'll find a way over that. But this was a complete and utter destruction of, at the time, 28 years of business that my business partner and I put every ounce of our souls, tears, sweat, blood, everything into this, not to mention all of the employees here who we don't even call them employees, we call them team. These were people that I have employees that are now upwards of 25 years with us. Wow. Many in the teens, right? Unheard of in the technology business.
Yeah.
We're talking about families that were going to forever be affected because my first thoughts were things like bankruptcy, like complete loss of revenue, like we're going to be out of business. This is going to bury us. And it's not just going to affect me and my partner and our livelihoods, but the livelihoods of a lot of people. And then I started to think about all of our clients and how they must now also be going through this. So it was a massive amplification of that individualized feeling that started to pancake on top of me. And I don't know if you want to call this Catholic guilt, but I somehow felt personally responsible for all of that. So the enormous weight, the psychological pressure, when I give this presentation, and I'm feeling it slightly now, so you'll forgive me if I get a little choked up here, but I can feel that pressure still to this day. Sort of, it's omnipresent inside. It doesn't go away. It's never going to go away. It's like a demon that kind of haunts me on the inside. That feeling of just utter helplessness and total responsibility for just what happened, even though like that is not a fair assessment of what happened to us, right? I was a victim. Kaseya was a victim. All of my customers were victims, and I did nothing wrong. We did nothing wrong as a company, but in that moment, I felt that we were responsible, that we did something wrong, that it was all on us, and there was no way that I could pay that bill. The check just came, and there was zero way that I could pay that bill.
Yeah, and plus you got 80 customers telling you exactly that it's your fault.
Some of them did, yes. Not all of them. Some of them were actually quite reasonable and calm throughout the
Good.
Oh,
situation.
that's awesome.
I think it's sort of that bell curve. You're going to get some people who became our biggest cheerleaders, and they sent us food and well wishes and called to see how we were doing, right?
Yeah.
And then the others that thought that I was the devil incarnate, right?
Yeah.
So give me a 30-second overview of what that call to your wife was like.
Oh yeah. Come on, David. There's a whole chapter in my book about this that's coming out, and so yeah, at some point I had to, and there's a lot of lessons that are packed into this story, and I'll try to compress it into 30 seconds. But I called her at about an hour and a half into this thinking, oh crap, I need to let her know that I ain't making it home and
This week.
plans are ruined. Right. So, I basically told her that I only had 30 seconds and that she should not call me back until literally unless somebody was dead. Right. I mean, that was the warning that I gave her. Because I needed to make her feel or know that the severity of the impact here was potentially fatal for us. So she was very calm and supportive of me. She understood quickly what I think, or at least what was going on mostly. I didn't really communicate super well to her. David, I don't know if you're married, but if you are, twice. Okay. At the same time? No. I'm kidding.
No, I couldn't survive that.
That communication, sometimes we say things maybe as men, and I don't mean to be sexist here, but sometimes we're not the best communicators. And I did not communicate entirely well to my wife that day about exactly what was going on. But the nutshell is that, she was incredibly supportive of anything that I needed, not just that day, but not just that weekend, and not even just that week, but for the weeks and months to come. And even to this day, as I spend weekends penning my book, that she is super supportive of me investing the time into doing projects like this.
It's one of those moments where you hope that you don't have to go into a long explanation. Just know from the sound of my voice.
Yes.
This is not good.
No, it wasn't. And I really tried to do that in short order. The mistake I made, if there's any lesson to be learned there, is that I had more than 30 seconds to give her. I mean, for Pete's sakes, I could have given her a few minutes of my time, even 5 or 10 minutes of my time, to allow her to ask questions and explain things a little bit more thoroughly. But again, it was, I was shell-shocked. I had ringing in my ears. There was a fog of war enveloping me and my company. There were bullets whizzing past my ears. I mean, these are all obviously metaphors for how I felt, but it was essentially, these are good descriptions. I've never served in the military, but I've spoken to people who have actually seen live action. And they tell me, yeah, you're not prepared for what happens in real warfare. And it can really send you sideways, and you're not really necessarily always thinking clearly in those moments.
Mm-hmm.
So before we go on, if somebody had said, hey, Robert, all of your clients are going to get hit in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have that day. If they said that, let's say New Year's ish.
Okay.
What would you have said to them prior?
How much do you want to buy my business for? I'm just right now. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding. As if you get to know me a little bit, humor is self-defense mechanism.
We're with you.
I have a very simple philosophy of life. You have two choices, either laugh or cry. So I choose laugh as much as possible. But great question. And I think it's one that most people, most organizations, not just MSPs, but if you're in charge of a business, a decision maker, an owner, you should consider these things. You should really think about, if that disaster were to happen, what would you do? For us, I would have probably focused a bit on the recovery efforts. So if I had no idea where it was coming from or how it would happen, I'm assuming that that's the fake scenario that we're playing here, and that I just knew that it would happen in some way beyond my control, I would have looked to the right of boom, right? So we talk about left of boom and right of boom. The boom is the event, right? The explosion, the incident, the attack, whatever you want to call it. Left of boom is everything that you do to prevent that boom from happening and all the preparation that you do. The right of boom is the response and the recovery part. So I would have really focused on that response and recovery, either through tabletop exercises, which would have probably helped inform us to answer questions like, well, how are we going to get to everybody all at once? Oh, crap, we don't have enough people. All right, so then how do we solve that problem? How would we get to everybody quickly? How would we communicate with them? But wait a minute, all of our systems are encrypted. We have no way to communicate with them. Things like that would have helped prepare us for that hypothetical scenario, perhaps a little bit better. It's unthinkable, but it's now being widely talked about in at least in our circles. This sort of complete 100% utter, you're down and out 100% of your clients. How do you recover? So I think the tabletop exercises where I would have invested that 6 months in to learn and understand how I would have responded and recovered better.
Well, communications plan is like our number one thing we try to get across is not, you got to communicate with your own internal staff and with everybody working remotely. You got to communicate with your clients, and then your clients have to communicate with their consumers. Whether, in healthcare, it's patients, but it's also, they've got to communicate as well. So everybody needs one. And then you've got the press. And when the big names, start coming out. So you're doing that. And now you say, well, I would do a better job, planning that part. And you've learned from it. How did Kaseya do?
How do they respond to the event? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you call them, they call you. Were they communicating effectively? Did they have a plan, or were they trying to learn like you were?
So I think, I want to be careful here.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I think it's really important to talk about. So let me just say for the record that we dissolved our relationship with Kaseya shortly thereafter. And one of the major reasons was my initial thoughts was Kaseya VSA. It's an excellent product. I love it. I put a lot of time and money into that thing over the year. And it was one of the kind of, we use a lot of software tools around here. It was one of the ones that we felt like this thing is working so well. It's awesome. Maybe it worked a little too well that day. One of the primary reasons, and even after the attack, I sort of was mentally committed to continue to use it as a product, right? That I thought it was a lightning strike that would never happen again. But the bad press started to circulate about, did they know? There was evidence that they knew. I mean, a lot of what are called zero-day exploits are known to software companies all the time. Microsoft's got probably 30 of them they're working on right now that you don't know about, that are in tools that you're using right this second. And I'm speaking to the listeners, not just you, David and Donna, right? That you guys know. There's stuff out there all the time, but I had clients emailing me some of this bad press. And I felt this was toxic. I had a PR problem. I mean, I had a lot of problems on my hand. Now I had a PR problem with trying to explain to them how I was going to go back to it. Working with law enforcement and forensics. The FBI was involved in this there was probably law enforcement agencies internationally that were involved in this that the three of us will never know about. That is my firm belief in talking to some FBI agents and some of the information that I got.
Yeah.
Their response was they were helpful that weekend because they helped corroborate an independent forensic analysis that we had done on our systems that was complete on that Saturday afternoon. By Sunday afternoon, they had corroborated what the other company had found, even though they didn't see their results. And so the importance of me saying that is that those two independent analysis informed our recovery efforts. So you have to remember that in that time, we had no idea how they got in, what they did, how long they were there, the extent of the damage. Did they copy? Exfiltrate is the fancy word for that.
Yes.
Did they copy data out of people's networks? Would they be holding us ransom or extorting us for that data back, right? Or the promise to delete it if we paid? We had we were in the dark on a lot of these questions, but we knew by those two reports that the damage was just a smash and grab style of attack, meaning the hacker broke in, use the system to push automatically ransomware to as many devices as possible, no data exfiltration, was in and out, and that was it, right? Smash the window, grab the diamonds, run down the street. It wasn't, they weren't inside casing the joint for months or weeks or even days. So that helped inform recovery efforts. So we knew at what point in time things happened, at what time can we recover servers back to and be safely or assure that the ransomware was not still lurking inside those restored versions of servers, right? And then what process did we need to go through to handle all of that? So, they were helpful in that regard, but they, I think, were being pummeled by the press, and our recovery efforts, even if they showed up en masse at my office, would not have really assisted us. We needed the help of the community of other MSPs, friends that we had made over the decades that we've been involved in various communities. Those are the ones that we really needed, people who understood our business.
Well, and that's we did a whole episode discussing this during that time frame. And one of the things David pointed out were other MSPs were coming in to help and, saying, look, we didn't get hit. We're here to help you. What can we do? And you're right. It's a community approach.
So, and that is exactly what happened to us. One of our peers knew what happened. I mean, there was a lot of communication going on among us that weekend. And he basically demanded all the other peer members in his brash sort of, ruffian way, which we love. But, he basically demanded all the other peers, like, get your asses on planes and get to New York because these guys are drowning and they need our help.
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't that we were incapable in terms of a capability issue. It wasn't that we understood what we needed to do. Like I said, we just had this math problem of the capacity issue. We didn't have enough hands to do the work. And so that's what happened. Community members just showed up en masse from as far away as California, Texas, Kansas, Minnesota, Florida. I'm probably missing Ohio. I'm probably missing a half a dozen other states of where friends had come in from. In fact, one gentleman, Jim Allen, if he's listening, man is a saint. And if you know Jim from Aces, Iowa, that's the name of the company. It's an MSP that he heard what happened to us through a mutual friend of ours. I don't know Jim from a hole in a wall. And he showed up at our doorstep and stayed with us for about 2 weeks. The man was a technical machine. I mean, he was experienced and super knowledgeable and incredibly nice and just banged away for 2 weeks helping us get through. Some of my customers still talk about him. Do you remember that guy, Jim, that was here to help us? He's still around? And I'm like, you bet he's around. I tell Jim jokingly, because now he's a dear friend of mine, that if he ever gets a flat tire in the middle of Iowa, don't call AAA, call me. I'm going to get on a plane and come change a tire for you.
That's awesome.
Because this is the response. This is what the community does for each other. And I don't know if this is a phenomenon that's only in the MSP world. It's the only world that I really know. But I'm being told it's a little peculiar because in large enterprises, nobody would help each other. Like banks, I have a friend from the banking industry. He said banks wouldn't help each other. They may commiserate over the phone, but they wouldn't send people. Like, no way, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bank thing, but MSPs are like brothers and sisters. It's like we grew up in the Wild West, and you help your neighbor in the Wild West.
I was going to say, I think that's kind of a shift that I've seen maybe over the last decade. I say before that, in my experience before that, people tended to keep everything so close to the chest. They didn't want to talk to anybody else. They were scared you're going to steal their secret sauce. Yeah. But at some point, everybody
about what we do.
Right. At some point, everybody realized, wait a minute, there is no secret sauce, and you're not going to steal anything because there's nothing to steal. So let's just do business together.
In fact, we have so much more to gain just by sharing.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's why we have ISACs and all of those things today, is so that we can share those kind of details because they're so important. But I will tell you, in healthcare, it becomes even more complicated because the organizations get hit, and somebody has to take care of those patients.
Yes.
So you got that overflow, and now studies are showing how single health system being hit in a region impacts every other health system in that region because you're having to send the patients all to these other spots. And there's I don't know if you're familiar with the attack on the University of Vermont Medical Center, but I'm sure you can relate to the scenario. They were hit so hard that everything was down, and they have come out and done some work like you, trying to get people to understand this is what happened and how it, unfolds on a personal level. They ended up having to call in the National Guard.
That's crazy, but
Wow.
understandable. Believe me,
Yeah.
like it's crazy, but I'm not surprised in the slightest based upon our experience.
Yeah, and I mean, they had to call up the governor and say, "Help us." And so to take that on a small business level, that had to have been overwhelming, but also
I don't have the governor's phone number either, right?
yeah.
I'm just a little company, right? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, right? I'm not making Wall Street Journal headline news, not as, or most MSPs would not.
No.
Who do you rely on? And that's why I liken it to the Wild West, because in the Wild West, people learned you survive by helping your neighbor, right?
Yep.
It's sort of that, and it's that part of that country that has those sort of values that we find that exists within the MSP space, is that we recognize that when one of us is, or at least I've been saying this, is that when you attack one of us, you attack all of us, right? Yep. When one of us is down, all of us are down, and we need to lift each other up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a message that Eric Decker and some of the other folks we're involved in the healthcare cybersecurity task group. And their message is we need to get to the point where a hit on any of us is a hit on all of us.
Yep. So I know your viewers can't see, but the two of you can right now, because we're on a video right now and they're only recording audio, I believe. But there's an American flag that's hanging in my background in my office. It's not a virtual backdrop. It's a real 6-foot nylon American flag. And my parents are immigrants from Italy, peasants from the mountains of Italy, came to this country with zero, and I mean zero, in their pocket, put 4 sons through college. I'm living the American dream. I firmly believe that this is a national problem that we need to come together despite whatever differences that we have and recognize exactly that these are attacks on all of us. I mean, I may feel it, you may feel it, Dave may feel it in our microscopic little worlds, but we have to come to this realization that they're attacking all of us. They're not singling out David or Robert or Donna. They're singling us out because of that flag that's hanging behind me. Mm-hmm. They want money and they want to destroy our country. And I'll have none of it.
There you go. Yeah. We're with you. we, our big thing is, healthcare is critical infrastructure. And, the focus and having you on is, I often will hear from my healthcare, facilities, and the doctors will say, I can't imagine going through this without you, because you at least knew what was happening.
Yep.
I had no idea. And it's unfortunate that I've had to be there to see it happening, but to hear your story reminds me so much of them, but they would have been just one of your clients.
Right.
To take that and amplify their place. My job is to remain calm, have a plan, all those things, but to amplify, to have 80 of them I'm talking to at the same time, I can't even comprehend it, even just with what I do.
It was bizarre. I mean, it was really, really bizarre to have conversations that, I mean, I can't even get into the gory details of the conversations that I had with people that I have developed relationships with over, a decade or more, that had such positive business relationships with, that were now really getting torn apart at the seams. Or I could hear the franticness in their voices about, what was happening and what it meant to them. And then, like you said, it was just this feedback loop for us, having to hear it from 80 some odd, different businesses that were all yelling and screaming the same obscenities or pleading with us. I mean, it was There's everything and anything in between those two lines of just begging us to screaming at us.
Mm-hmm.
And there were very few logical words said those first few days by everybody.
Sure.
And like I said, it's because my tale is mostly about the emotions and the psychological human story of what happens. You literally, and when I say you, I'm really kind of speaking to the threat actors that infiltrated our systems. And there is a gentleman, by the way, sitting in the Dallas jail cell right now, awaiting sentencing. Yaroslav Vasinski is his name.
Nice.
Who was the tip of the spear of this attack, apprehended by Interpol, by the way, and extradited to the United States October of 2021. But this is the effect of what he did by pushing that button and doing what he did. And this is just my story. I'm just one out of those 50 or 60, right?
Right.
So you talked about that amplification happening with me. Multiply that again by another factor of 50 or maybe more.
Mm-hmm. It's just, I can't imagine the level of overwhelming. So how long did it take you, from boom to the part where you could finally say, I'm going to leave the office on time today?
Yeah. Leaving the office on time didn't happen for quite a while.
Yeah.
Let me, in classic politician style, I'm going to take your question and I'm going to answer it with I'm going to answer a different question. Yes, I'm running for office for anyone who wants to support me for any time. No, I'm only kidding. That's a job I don't want.
Yeah.
So we recovered about 95% of systems for about 95% of clients in 17 calendar days. So in those first 2 weeks, we were running around the clock nonstop, including that weekend, right? Well, that weekend was a lot of hurry up and wait and do nothing and searching for answers. But once we had the green light to go ahead with recovery, starting on Independence Day, observed July 5th, that was a Monday of 2021, we began to roll out teams and started to do recovery. It took us about 17 days. So around July 19th, right? 17 days from the attack to get to a point where we were mostly recovered everywhere. But the truth is, Donna, is that there was still a lot of mess around, right? When you think about a computer and you rebuild something or put a new computer in, it's all those little details, right? Mm-hmm. It's all those little tiny things like a printer, right? Or or I used to have a shortcut or an icon that did this, and now it's not.
Who cares about an icon?
Well,
they do.
Well, they care about it, and you have to look at it from the end user perspective. That is our business here. I can do 99.9% of my job perfectly. It's the 0.1% that is imperfect that you will have your what handed back to you.
Yes.
And so it started to try to get to your answer, though. To prove that I'm not really a politician, is that the ramp from there started to, every day started to kind of get a little bit easier to breathe, right? And although people were still kind of getting in early and leaving really late, you certainly didn't see a lot of people hanging around at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Maybe they were now home checking in on things, or picking up a couple extra tickets, or resolving things remotely here and there. But for the most part, the high intensity of those first, I'll say 2 to 3 weeks, quickly started to dissipate. That's when all of the community members that had showed up here to help us, most of them had gone back home.
Yeah, so 2 to 3 weeks, and that's because you were fortunate enough to have that community to jump in and help.
Yes.
And
that weighed extremely heavily on my mind, by the way. That very point, if you think about what you just said, it's because I had that community. And I'll tie it back to something that David said earlier. What about those of us in this business that don't invest in that community, that don't make friends with others, that don't go out to conferences with an open mind and open ears, right? And an open heart to embrace the community? Right? There's many of us that do not do that. So I wonder how well they would be prepared to survive an event like this, as well as their customers, right?
Well, we have the stories from prior. They weren't this big. It was smaller MSPs that just ghosted their clients.
Yeah, and they're out of business, right? And those clients have
Yeah.
nowhere else to go other than to plead with somebody. Like, we'll get a random phone call, say,
Yeah.
we're stuck. We need help. What do we do? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I may be selfish here for a minute, what I did in August of 2021 is thinking about the very thing I had just spoken about in an effort to ensure that the community was better prepared. And in my way of flipping the bird to the bad guys, right? Remember that whole thing about nationalistic pride is you can beat me up, but you can't beat the community up. So how do I make the community better? So I'm going to give you a long story short version. I registered the domain name msp911.org, a website that I had envisioned in my head, which exists now today. At the time, I had envisioned that I never wanted an MSP ever to go through what we did, to walk through the gates of hell and traverse all 9 layers of hell and probably then some alone. Thankfully, we had a lot of friends at our side and we were not alone, but I imagined those that might have to do that one day, and I would never want to see that happen again. So the idea is to codify a way for an MSP to reach out for help, to get assistance from those of us that are experienced in these types of things, either through their profession or through hard lessons like what we had to swallow, and to get the coaching, the advice, and the help, and eventually even the boots on the ground to come to their aid. So we partnered up with CompTIA eventually. Long story here. So CompTIA is the Switzerland of the MSP space, right?
Yes,
They're a nonprofit. Yes. They don't stand to make money by aligning with one product or another or anything like that. They're sort of a neutral ground, and everybody loves CompTIA. So it was a perfect place to sort of hang this website. And if you go to it, it'll redirect to a page where there's a phone number that you can call if you're an MSP and you ever have a major security incident like this. And the idea is that we'll do a quick intake and we'll get you dispatched over to volunteers, 100% volunteer, by the way. Everything I'm talking to you about, zero charge, right? These are just people who want to step up to the plate and help out because they have the same mentality that I do, that we're just like neighbors in the Wild West. And if we don't help each other, we're all going to die. So let's help each other. Let's just be there for somebody who needs to be picked up off the floor and dusted off and put on a path to recovery. So that's the sort of short version of a kind of a long explanation about what that's about. We call it the CompTIA Emergency Response Team.
I love it.
Yeah. Nice.
So
we're going to be discussing that with all of our groups.
Bad things happen, but you know what? Good things can come out of them. And so this is just my effort to give back to the community that helped us in our dark hours and really helped save us. And it's my way of just that sort of pay it forward mentality, or that Go Giver. If you've ever read that book, if you haven't, I highly recommend that you do, by Bob Berg. And I make no money on those endorsements, by the way. Bob doesn't even know me, but he's a wonderful story, wonderful book. It's sort of that mentality of let's link arms and help each other, right? They're not going to they could defeat one of us like they defeated me, but they're not going to defeat all of us. Not if we stand together.
And you're back standing strong.
I'd like to think I am.
Well, I'm glad you're out sharing all of this, though, because I think it's so valuable for so many people. And we can always say, well, we were helping someone, but your personal story is, while heart-wrenching to hear, it is important to share. And I really appreciate you doing that.
I appreciate the opportunity to be out there and telling it. And I just I really feel that there's no shame in victimhood, and we shouldn't feel that if something bad were to happen to you, as awful as it might be, it's important to talk about it, right? There's strength in community, in us, linking up, and there's only one way we're going to do this is by talking about these things and learning from things and improving ourselves. If I decided to shut up and do nothing about it, then the emergency response team, that msp911.org website would not exist.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not saying I don't have any evidence that we helped anybody yet because it just launched, but maybe one day we'll be able to talk about somebody that we helped. And so
I feel certain that will happen.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually hoping in some weird way that we never help anybody. That right. It's like one of those things.
That's fair.
You don't want to get that call, but I'm in your camp, Donna, of believing that that call's going to come in, and the phone may ring off the hook one day. I don't know, but I sure hope to God that it doesn't.
Yeah. So prior to July 2nd, 21, what was your legacy going to be?
Good question. Yeah.
Are you saying that this is my legacy?
I think you've been redefined.
I may have been reshaped in some ways or redefined. Yes, for sure. I mean, listen, we're on a really great trajectory of building this business to a very respectable level. I think we're still on that trajectory. So I don't think those plans have changed per se. They may have been slowed down a bit because of some of the revenue loss. And, and I don't have a problem talking about that either. I mean, we definitely lost revenue. I'd be a liar. It would be incredulous for me to say, oh, we saved every single, client, like nobody fired us. That's a bunch of, what.
Yeah.
Stuff happens. So, I mean, from a business legacy perspective, we want to continue growing this company and building a place where our team has a great place to work and can fulfill not only their professional goals, but also feed their families, right? And extract as much personal value out of their employment with us as possible. My business partner and I talk about what the future looks like constantly. We're not necessarily ready to get out of this business anytime soon. I think there's more work for us to do, but we're starting to think about things maybe differently, right? Well, maybe there's different things that we can do. Maybe we can relinquish more control. Maybe we can hire more senior leadership level people. I mean, these are just some thoughts and ideas, not necessarily things that we're acting on right now, but also what are some of the other things that we want to do in life, right? It's certainly opened up my eyes to that thought of anything can happen at any moment. And therefore, do I want to make sure I'm trying to live my life to the fullest that I can without being reckless, of course.
Right.
So I think the legacy plan still continues. The business plan still continues. The change is the additions, right? Not the change of course, but the new things that we'll be doing on top of this, right? Otherwise, if you've altered me or if you've left an indelible mark on me in a way that changes my trajectory, then you've won. And I refuse to give in to that.
That's awesome.
So as we wrap up here, Robert, give me, the one or two things that you are doing differently today that you weren't doing before. And I'm sure you've talked about several already, and all of them are very positive outcomes. But at some point you had to sit down and go, okay, these are the things we have to do differently. Because if this ever happens again,
if it ever happens again, and we do play that game here and we play it seriously, where we don't feel like, oh, well, it will never happen to us again. It's most certainly can happen to us again. And quite frankly, maybe I've even put a little bit of a target on my back by being so outspoken in the community. Maybe somebody wants to take another shot at me or us, right? That would suck. I hope that doesn't happen. But I did mention a number of things. So one of them is this sort of change of perception about cybersecurity, right? In the past, a lot of small businesses would have not taken it so seriously. But I'll say that one fundamental change, and it's a subtle one, very subtle, is our just seriousness about it. It's like it's a non-negotiable now. Years ago, people used to drag their feet on it. I don't have the money for this. I don't want to do it. A million reasons, right? Why is this thing important? It's a pretty clear conversation today. You either are getting on board or, you're gonna get on board with the plan or you're going to find somebody else to take on your liability, right? Because that's what it becomes when you're not taking cybersecurity seriously. So maybe a little bit of a shift in mindset and attitude in terms of how we go to market and how we're protecting our customers. many of them, I think, respond well once you have that contextual experience to be able to, drive that point home. The other thing too is I spoke earlier about, or just recently about, how legacy changes and how you start to think differently. Even the time that I focus on within the company, we made a decision here 2 years ago for me personally to step down from our leadership team, right? Well, that's kind of odd, Robert. You're a 50% owner. You're not a leader in the organization anymore. Well, I mean, I am naturally because of who I am and what I am, but on paper, right, I don't have any decision making at the top level of this company anymore. I speak with my partner and we get aligned on things, but my day-to-day interaction is heavily surrounding something called account management or VCIO, as well as our cybersecurity practices. So I'm investing that time because we felt it was important enough, too damn important for us to ignore, for one of us to go very, very deep in these areas to really strengthen the company in that way. And I do have a big ego, but it's not big enough to know that this is the right thing to do for the company and for our customers and for our employees and ultimately for my partner and I.
Yeah. Well, Robert, thanks for your time today. Great story. I wish we had more time to go through it because we did have to skip through a lot in order to get to it. And I know you have a book coming out at some point, so I'll be looking at Amazon for that to happen, and I'm sure I'll see it in the MSP community when it pops up.
We'll promote it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. I would very much appreciate that. I still have a little bit of writing to do. I'm about maybe 2/3 or maybe 3/4 of the way done with it, but I'm excited to try to hopefully get it out before the end of 2023, because I think it's an important story, not just for the MSP entire community, but even beyond. I think the way I'm trying to write this is that it's a tale of business, right? And like I keep saying, like I've said earlier, it's the human side of things. It's the human side of business. So it might be a story about a technological problem happening to a technological company, but I hope that the story transcends this community and helps affect other people as well. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing the timeshare quote and my name listed there, and it is spelled with one M.
There somewhere, maybe a footnote.
Yeah, in the very back of the book. It's dedicated to that doofus guy on the podcast. Yeah, but thanks again, Robert.
Listen, and just if I can say one thing, David, you and I have not met other than this podcast. I've not seen you. I've not spoken to you. I know we kind of connected online, and that's why I'm on this show. But like the fact that you're an MSP, and Donna, you as well, because you were an MSP at some point, there's just this instant bond that's here already. I'd like to extend that sort of circle of friendship to you both. And like, if there's anything I can ever do for you, and that's proof, right?
Yeah.
That this community, it's a little weird and nutty in that way. It's not a cult. I promise you, if you're not part of this community, it's not cultish. It's just, you can run into a stranger on the street and say, oh, you're an MSP, I'm an MSP too. And suddenly your spouses are wondering why you're talking to the stranger for so long, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then there's this other guy standing there going, I'm an MSSP.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a different story. We're not going to go down that road.
All right. Well, thanks again, Robert. And I look forward to talking to you in the future to see what's going on.
Thank you both. I really appreciate you both.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.